the more you ramp up an initiative to do something productive, the more resistance there will be to it, right? You'll see the other side resisting harder. So knowing that there's a strong resistance sometimes means that you're doing some good work, right? And you're just going to meet resistance doing it.
Lots of people and churches, when they're going the affirming route, they don't know what that entails. Or sometimes like queer culture is foreign. They know they want to love everyone, but they don't understand it fully. Or, there's a lot of terminology, and there is a clear identity in queer culture. And sometimes that's very intimidating and frightening. And I think sometimes people are really intimidated by the idea that if they go down that route, they'll lose what they love about church. And that's not true. They're not going to learn that. They're not going to lose that. It's just going to become more encompassing, and it's going to be more dynamic. But sometimes that change is really intimidating, for sure.
Like many churches who go through the affirming process, the life of the church is rarely all on the same page about everything that they're doing or everything that's happening in the world.
I was expecting a lot of pushback because of what I had been told about the community, but hadn't been here long enough to experience it. There was some, but not a lot. And there was one individual that was adamant that we were not going to go forward with this. And so she would come to the gathering and would co-opt the conversation. And it got to the point that I had to take her to one side and say, you can't do that. I know that you're not in favor. We all know that you're not in favor. I think the entire community knows that you're not in favor. You've expressed that, and now you need to give space to people who want to speak to you about it.
For some people, being affirming simply means we allow gay people to come to the church, right? And they can participate, but we don't want to be so loud about it. We don't want to be so bold about it. We don't necessarily want to be known as the gay church in the community.
Some folks saw it only as meaning, now we're becoming the gay church, which was not the intent behind it. But I think what was felt by some congregational members that may have been not quite as ready to make some of these changes and ways of being more inclusive in the congregation, and not just about LGBTQ issues, but about a broader understanding of inclusion.
Several years ago, I went to the ministerial here in Okotoks, and I was pulled aside by one of the ministers in a more conservative evangelical congregation. And I thought he wanted to talk to me about something totally different than what he wanted to talk to me about. But he got me in his office, and then he basically harangued me for being part of an affirming denomination, and thought that, of course, we shouldn't be doing same-sex marriages, and for sure I shouldn't be as part of this community. I gotta say, I haven't been that much involved in ministerial since then.
I think there's sometimes this idea that you can only get that same theological perspective if you were doing it the way that you were brought up. If you're doing it in the way of, dressing up for church, your Sunday best, and really that becomes a thing. So when you're kind of moving away from that idea, when you're moving away a little bit so that other people can fit in, which does require some change, I think sometimes people get scared of that change, and they are afraid to be perceived as, like a crazy radical new age Christian, rather than someone who just believes in Christ or believes in the theology of the congregation that they're looking into. And that's what I would say probably the biggest fear is sometimes. It's where do we fit in the spectrum, and recognizing that it is a spectrum, even though sometimes it doesn't look that way in smaller communities.
I think the biggest one that I would identify is just a lack of familiarity with what it means to be affirming and what the requirements of that are.
It took having conversations and saying, okay, this is what the rainbow flag represents. This is why it's so important. This is why we need to be so public and intentional and explicit with it. This is why.
It's important to be out there and openly affirming, because I don't think there was a genuine understanding of how some people had been so traumatized by communities of faith for being open about who they were. And so I think once people really realize that because church has been a safe space for, white, heteronormative, et cetera, people, it doesn't mean that it has been historically a safe place for everyone else. So I think from my perspective, it seemed to quell some of the anxiety to hear like, oh, this actually is important and this is needed, because us having like a cross hanging outside of our building, unfortunately, doesn't automatically send the message that everybody is safe and welcome here.
What I have encountered just a little bit more is a sort of apathy around it. This sense that why wouldn't we become affirming? And so they haven't attended perhaps as many events or classes or videos or anything like that we've had, even though we've tried to emphasize that affirming is different than welcoming. And I preached on it a couple of weeks ago and said, affirming is not the same as welcoming. We need to understand the differences.
We had to take some time to do some education around the fact that just because we know that's who we are, that doesn't necessarily mean that the community and the general public knows that's who we are. And once people heard some stories about how traumatizing some faith and church experiences had been for the LGBTQ2+ community, then there seemed to at least be acceptance of the fact, like, okay, this is something that we should actually be really explicit about publicly.
This should be a joyful experience. I think sometimes we're so deep in the fight that we forget that we're supposed to be joyful. So even amidst the tears and the challenges, just find at least one person that you can share a laugh with, right? And hug it out. And I know that's what kept us going, because if you don't have joy, you can't continue the good fight, because it's supposed to be the good fight, right? And so find good people.
If you take your time, you'll probably find that there are more people like you who want to join the movement, who want to support you, who want to be a part of it. This is normal. This is the norm. This is life. This is the way life is. And I think you'll find that you have more people who will want to join you than maybe you realize.
And where you might expect the mindset and the culture to be fairly rigid and fairly conservative, while there were maybe a few individuals like that, I think by leading them through processes of change and transformation in the arts and in the way we use technology and in all these other spheres, that then when you get to like, oh, here comes another big change, we're journeying towards affirming. It was like, oh, okay, yep, that's kind of what we do here. We're okay with big changes, and we trust the leadership. We trust that each other, that we're going to just journey through this together.